Welcome. This is the first series I am releasing in many years. But welcome to the Take This Shit Personal podcast. I'm so excited to be back with you guys. I took a hiatus for a while. It just became overwhelming, but this is the first of many series. And this particular series is based on girlfriends. So it's life as a girlfriend. And I'm really excited to see how you guys respond to the new energy, to the new background. I'm really, really excited. So this will be posted both as a visual podcast on YouTube out on the Barefoot Therapist, and it would also be posted as a podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. So again, welcome to the Take This Shit Personal podcast. I am your host, Shardé the Therapist, and I'm excited to get into it with you guys. I want to first reintroduce myself. My name is Shardé. I've been a therapist about 15 years, and I love pop culture. I love TV shows. I love how it really aligns with our real life, and especially Girlfriends, because that was one of my favorite shows. It was one of my favorite shows in it feeling like a real thing, even though I wasn't that old when the content came out. I'm really, really excited to revisit it now as not only an adult, but as a therapist. And I think that it also provides people a living perspective that they can relate to in some ways. So we're going to jump right into it. So this first episode is about Joan and perfectionism. So if you guys remember, Joan was the lawyer. She was in this really beautiful home that she was given to by her grandmother. She struggled a lot with feeling like she always had to have it together at any given time. She struggled often with relationships because of her need to get it right, or things to look a particular way or be a particular way. And now, do I understand the Joan perspective of, hey, I like that way that I like things. I don't like people getting in the way of that. I really have value in my house being cleaned a certain way, it looking and feeling a certain way, it providing a certain level of safety. However, when you get into relationships with other people, whether it's friends or parents or intimate and sexual relationships, we also have to allow space for humanity. And I will specifically say in this episode with Joan struggled with limiting herself. I can only be this thing, or I can only be that thing. So I'm sure you guys remember when she finally let go of all of those things and decided, you know what, I don't want to be a lawyer anymore. I don't feel the passion around this anymore. And she decided to open her restaurant against her mother's ideas and criticism, because the idea was, you already have a successful career. Why are you changing that? But I do think that was Joan's attempt to pivot to this freer space of a space where she felt passionate, a space where she wanted to be, not a space where she felt inclined to be as a result of her desire for success, which was really cool to see, because all of that came with all of these mistakes and all of this time where she didn't know anything, but she was allowing herself to jump in and learn and be vulnerable enough to not know, which was such a beautiful thing. But I want to backtrack with you. I want to go to the first episode with Joan. Now, if you guys remember in the first episode, Tony came to this event Joan had it was her birthday, at her house with one of her ex-boyfriends. And so Joan started to put on this show about, oh, I feel like this, oh, I look like this. This idea that you messed around and left something perfect, when the idea was this person had not changed. Had he changed partners? Yes. Had he shifted his thought process? Possibly. But was he exactly the same person? Yes. So no matter how perfect Joan decided she was going to be or not, this person was still not going to serve her in a way that made her feel seen or wanted or loved, which it appeared that that's what she wanted. And her thought was, well, if you wanted Tony, what's wrong with me? But there's nothing wrong with you. And oftentimes I find that because the person we want doesn't want us, we then in turn think, well, something is wrong with me. And quite often it is a saving grace that you don't get in relations with someone that doesn't want to have anything to do with you, because their level of desperation will mistreat you every single time. So when we talk about perfectionism, we also can talk through how sometimes that can be a trauma response. You have something happen to you and you decide, okay, the best way for me to get through this is to consistently get it right. I'm going to be the smartest. I'm going to go to the best schools. I'm going to do everything that I'm supposed to do. I don't want to ever get in trouble, because that's when people see the most value in me. That's when I get the most praise. That's when I get seen the most, heard the most, valued the most. But then what happens is, we then transition into, there's no room for anything else. There's no room for mistakes. There's no room to not know something. There's no room to mess up. There's no room to just be human and just let it all hang out and have a level of freedom in not considering someone else's interpretation of you first. That's a really scary place to be, especially because you can't control what people think or what they perceive, no matter what you say or do. You can do your best to communicate it, but perfectionism is unreal. It's an unrealistic setup for ourselves, because we are putting ourselves in a position to experience unnecessary stress, undue criticism. And a lot of times we are the hardest on ourselves in that space. Joan was harder on her than any of her friends, her parents, her father. Now her mother was so interesting, which I think, again, there goes the trauma response. I want to please you. I want you to love me. So I'm going to put myself in a position where you value me based on my accomplishments. But when you do that, you have to keep accomplishing things in line with what you think they want. And that may be the complete opposite of what serves you as a person. So it's a very, very interesting place. I also want to highlight how that contributed to her micromanaging relationships. The very thing that she didn't want from her mother, which was the criticism, and she wanted to be valued just as a person, she struggled to do with other people. If they didn't show up a particular way, if they didn't say a particular thing, if they didn't do a particular thing, it created this challenge of, well, what do I do next? If you don't continue in line with what I think or expect, how are we in relationship with one another? How do we survive in relationship with one another? And you can see that when she met Aaron down the line, because it was all or nothing with Joan. Either I take on projects where I need to feel like I need to save you, and I'm so great and I'm so perfect that not only do you being a disaster highlight my perfection, but then that gives me something to do and say that I saved it. So you guys remember the boyfriend she had that was a sex addict. Knowing what this was from the beginning, she made herself look like the savior. This, I just came to your rescue and I showed up for you and I was this perfect person, and here you go ruining my life. Same with Ellis. When Ellis had the baby and he was a struggling actor and he was all these things before they met, and somehow she was supposed to transition him over and he was going to be this perfect partner. She was not a perfect partner, and neither was he. But it's really interesting how she tried to pivot or set herself in these relationships as if she excuse me, she was the perfect person. That then kind of stabbed her in the back on the back end, because no matter how great you think you are, you still are flawed. No matter how much you pour into other people, they can still leave. And they still have the right to call you on your things that you don't do well, or that you're flaws. So it's a very interesting topic. I wonder too, what do you guys think about perfectionism, and how many of you struggle with it just in general? Because life shows us that things can be very difficult, even when we give our best, and our capacity it can change on any given day. But setting ourselves up to consistently need control over people, places, and things, it sets us up for disappointment, for failure, for having unrealistic lifestyle, undue and unnecessary stress and overwhelm, because we don't know what to do when we're not trying to control something. And then this idea that our way is the best way all the time is a dangerous place to be. So I want to pivot back a little bit. When talking about people who struggle with perfectionism, the other is, again, going back to the struggle in relationships. And successful people struggle most with control, because some of that control benefited them in their success. So oftentimes, if this level of control has benefited me in my career, and I've seen the change and I've seen the growth, and I've made all these millions of dollars or all this money, and I've gone up the ladder in my career, why is it different in relationships? Well, because people, human beings, don't want to, especially adults, they don't want to be controlled. They want to be in partnership. They want to, well, some want to be in partnership. They want to be companions, but they don't want a mother or a father. But now, where did she at least find that she did the best in relationships? With partners she believed she played mom to. I am your nurturer. I am showing you the ropes. I'm here as your foundation. I'm here as your backup. Those relationships she lasted the longest in because she served as a parent, not as a partner. And eventually that gets old. Eventually that person wants to just be led or cared for or taken care of or nurtured. But because they've set themselves up to be everything and the parent, it's hard to revise that relationship when you've done it for so long. And this person is conditioned at this particular point to look for their mother, to look for the person to save them, to look for the person who will acquiesce. Because again, how are you setting up how you're valued? If your value is in praise and worship and oh, you did this for me, an accomplishment, well, you got that. And that also comes with something. I don't know how many of you play The Sims, but I am a avid Sims player, not in the recent years, but I've played The Sims since Sims 1. And you guys know how in The Sims, if you have a baby in The Sims and you teach your kid one thing, it'll tell you adversely, this is going to be the consequence of that. So if you teach them kindness, they may like this. If you teach them empathy, they may like boundaries. Like it takes away from their boundaries. So that's, again, how we are as humans. We may do well in one area and as a consequence of that, or we then struggle in another area. So it's a give and take a lot of times where we are growing and changing. But perfection is one of those spaces where we have to give ourselves permission to just be. Giving yourself permission to learn, to be open, to not know it all, to listen and not have the answers for everything, to not take on partners that need a mother or a caregiver, to take on a partner that can actually be your partner. But that also means you can't have everything your way. Someone who is confident in their skin and who knows who they are and what they want and who can meet you in that space is not going to want to be controlled by you. So you're going to have to choose, and usually that is the crossroads for people who struggle with perfectionism is, do I want to be in control more than I want to be in partnership? They will say I want to be in partnership, but not if it jeopardizes me having control of things. I want my co-parent to be active, but not if that jeopardizes me having the last say so of everything, and I see that a lot in parenting where you have parents who, and I'll speak specifically about women, you have women who have men that want to be active fathers, but because they don't do everything they say they want them to do, you don't do this, you're not parenting exactly the way I believe you should be parenting in your own home. I don't want you having any interaction with our children at all, and my child at all. And they make it about them when it's not about you at all. It's about your child. And trying to have control over an adult person doesn't work. Working collaboratively works. And I'm not saying these men are always the most collaborative or, great parents. I am not saying that. I am specifically speaking on this nuance I see far too frequently where if I can't have my way, you can't have them at all. And that's not fair to your child. It's not about you. There are things that they need to have, like their medication and, certain things like that. But that's not fair to the child. So this doesn't just show up in intimate relationships. It shows up in parenting. It shows up with your friends. If this person says one thing I don't like, how do I manage it? How do I manage conflict? How do I manage things that make me uncomfortable because it doesn't look like what I thought it should look like? And that's when you step back and you take consideration of those things. I wrote this workbook called Finding Me, and it's on Amazon. It's on my website. And it really talks about the idea gets people started with the journey of figuring out who I am and what do I want, not just based in the traumatic response of things or the coping of things, but in your true free form. What do I want, and what do I want that to look like? And what do I need to get rid of, reposition, so I can have what I actually want and need, not in me just responding to trying to survive. So I do want to also talk about how this connects to the culture of Black women having to always have it together and having this ultimate level of independence. That word scares me. And at first, I used to say, I want to be independent. I'm this independent Black woman. And not for nothing, I don't want to be. No, thank you. I want to be self-reliant. I believe that I am a self-reliant individual. If anything in my life changed at any point in time, I can adjust. I can take care of myself. I can take care of our children, my husband and I's children. If something were, knock on wood, were to ever happen, I can make it. And not just make it, I can thrive with time to adjust. But often people are too afraid to just be self-reliant and connect in community. They're afraid of abandonment. They're afraid of making themselves vulnerable for people to hurt you. And let's be clear, people hurt us whether we make ourselves vulnerable or not. Why? You see it in people being triggered, them being extremely angry, outwardly angry. And it's not even about them being angry at all. It's them experiencing a level of hurt that they are not able to process at the time, because vulnerability would require you to process it as hurt. But as specifically speaking about Black women, this idea that we always have to have it together, and that we have to be the perfect partner, and we have to have this great career, and we have to consistently accomplish things because the world and racism and white privilege have told us, systematic racism and slavery told us we were never good enough. We were never smart enough. We were never the best thing smoking. And that idea is not relevant at all. We have always been the best thing smoking. We have always been extremely smart. We have always been nurturers of the earth and our children, and creators of culture and change and growth and beautiful things. So that's not real. But have you tied that idea to your value? Is I have to consistently have it together. And what would it mean if you didn't? Worst case scenario, let the story play out. If you didn't have it together, then what? Somebody's going to have something to say. Well, they say something anyway. Somebody's going to talk shit. Well, they do that anyway. So what is the worst case scenario in this? And I want you to consider what's the worst case scenario, because if not, you're not providing yourself enough space to just let it be and find that you will have so much joy and less stress and compassion for yourself if you weren't consistently trying to tie your value to being everything to everyone and having it all together. That does not relieve much other than your ego and pride and this fear of what is to happen if you don't. But you aren't even allowing yourself enough space to find out when you deserve to find out. Because the beauty of not having it together is fantastic, actually. And how many things we keep together. And one of my favorite things is, today I'm just here. I'm going to figure things out. We're going to let it happen. I make it through every day. And I don't want to make it through every day as in just surviving. But there are days where I am just surviving. I'm just trying to make it through. And that's okay, too. And there are days where we don't have it together and we don't know what the fuck is going on. And we are a mess. Good for us. Let's be a mess together, okay? Because I'm glad for you. I'm glad for you allowing yourself to be a mess. Because it's so exhausting controlling everything all the time, or at least thinking, because you don't control shit other than you. There are things that you can manage and things that you do actually have control over, but a lot of it you don't, especially people. So it is an illusion anyway, and the amount of energy and exhaustion that comes as a result of that. Why do that to yourself? Why let that be the standard for you of living? It is exhausting even talking about it. So, I want to be clear that the definition of perfection is the condition or state or quality of being free or as free as possible from all flaws and defects. That is absolutely unreasonable. If you need another example, I want you to think of Brie from Housewives, the show that came out years and years ago called Housewives, and she was perfect. But behind closed doors, she was a disaster. She was a disaster. But the better thing is, if you would let yourself get support and release those things out into the world more often, you would have less stress. You would have less isolation. You would have less overwhelm and overstimulation if you just let the world be. Is it a scary place for someone who wants and is used to controlling things, or at least thinking they have control? Yes. But it's a beautiful place to be once you embrace that space. So if you need more of this, please, 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 one, don't be afraid to go get you a therapist. Look on Clinicians of Color, look on Therapy for Black Girls, Psychology Today, to find a therapist that aligns with your insurance or self-pay. Make sure they are licensed in your state. Other than that, I provide passion and purpose coaching. So that's really for people who are trying to explore, where am I going and what do I want to do? What do I want the next step for me to look like? I have several books that help you explore this space. Finding Me is on Amazon by me, Shardé. But I also have journals and coloring books that I love. I have coloring books for Black women, and it has different topics like the mother version or edition of coloring. But you have to start somewhere and practice letting go. There's a book called Let Them. I would encourage you to start there. Start with one of my workbooks. Start with reading if that serves you. Or you can continue on this journey. We have a whole series of self-exploration as it relates to girlfriends. But I hope you enjoyed this episode today. Please like, share, and subscribe if you're not already subscribed. Share with a friend. Make sure you mark the little bell when I come back to you next time. But I look forward to us continuing this exploration. These series will post once a week, and I'm really, really excited for y'all to be on this journey with me. Share with a friend, and I'll see you soon. Peace.